Hey guys, how are you all doing? This is the MMA breakdown with my predictions for UFC 181, Hendricks versus Lawler 2. Today is Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving everyone. Hope you're all enjoying the holidays and doing well. But UFC 181, real excited for this card. This is what a pay-per-view card should look like. Two title fights. Big name guys, star power. None of this, flyweight, bantamweight, double title fights on a card. These are real name guys: Hendricks, Lawler, Pettis. And aside from that, the two title fights, the rest of the main card is pay-per-view quality as well. Browne versus Schaub, Ferguson versus Trujillo, the perfect opener for a pay-per-view. And then I think they just made this change. Originally it was supposed to be Raquel Pennington versus Ashley Evans-Smith, who is replacing Holly Holm on the pay-per-view. And I was excited to see Holly Holm debut in the UFC, but obviously after she fell out, that fight on the main card was pretty awful. But it looks like they moved that one to the preliminary card and moved Duffee versus Hamilton to the main card. So nice to see the UFC taking away from the Fox Sports 1 prelim card to try to bolster the pay-per-view card, which I can really appreciate. Obviously Faber has kind of taken this role as the headliner of the prelim card on Fox Sports 1. They weren't going to move him to the main card. He's fighting Francisco Rivera. Same role he had on the July 4th card against Alex Caceres. And Duffee versus Hamilton, obviously not a... I'm excited to see Duffee again. Hamilton, I think, is just a very low-level heavyweight. But, I think that's a big improvement over Pennington and Evans-Smith. But really glad to see a strong pay-per-view card. I think it's been a while. Obviously, 178 with Jones Cormier, that card was stacked. One of the best pay-per-view cards in years. But when the main event fell out there, it was real disappointing. And 179. 179 Aldo versus Melendez 2. Aside from the main event, I thought that card was terrible, and it's just kind of what we're getting accustomed to in this era of global expansion. The UFC is really watering down their pay-per-view cards, and just real excited for this one. Yeah. So let's run through the card and try to keep my predictions quick this time. And let's start off with the UFC Fight Pass preliminary card at featherweight. Alex White versus Clay Collard. I think this is actually a pretty decent fight. Alex White in his debut knocked out Esteban Payan. I thought he looked really great. And then in his next fight got knocked out by Lucas Martins and was really stifled by the technical range striking of Martins. Couldn't get anything going. Looked like a completely different guy than the guy who knocked out Payan in his debut. And Clay Collard coming off of a real strong showing in his debut loss to Max Holloway. Max Holloway, I think, is just criminally underrated at featherweight right now. I think he's one of the best guys there. He has a robbery loss to Bermudez, and Bermudez was one of the top guys before losing a couple weeks ago. But Clay Collard to take on Holloway in his debut on short notice, and competed very well. Went all the way to the third round, was competitive with him up to that point, ended up getting finished, but just looked like a real talented boxer. Was just able to engage with Holloway, brawl with him, And when he would get pushed up against the cage, backed up against the fence, and it looked like Holloway really had him in a tight spot, he was able to use great head movement. He was ducking and weaving and able to escape those positions. And I also remember being impressed with his ground game. Not that he was had great wrestling or anything, but they were billing him as a boxer. But I thought his ground game looked he looked competent there. So I think he's more of a complete fighter than White. White getting knocked out in his last fight, and Collard already in his UFC career having faced a much higher ranked fighter in Holloway and doing well against him. I have to go with Collard. I think he's going to win this one. And next up at bantamweight, Sergio Pettis versus Matt Hobar. Not real excited for this fight. I think the hype on Sergio Pettis has kind of died. Not because he's a bad fighter, but his last fight against Yatsen Meza had nothing for him on the feet, and Pettis was just content to outpoint him, never really doing anything to hurt him. I think Pettis is a talented striker, but got rushed too early in the UFC. It gave him a couple of not very skilled opponents, and Will Campuzano in his debut. And then in his second fight against Alex Caceres, I thought he was doing great. I thought he was whooping Caceres' ass, really beating him on the feet, and just kind of got caught in a scramble in the third round and got subbed. And Matt Hobar, another low-level talent, got ran over by Pedro Munoz in his debut, and then in his next fight had a very dominant win over Aaron. God, what's his name? Give me a second here. Just blanking on the guy's name. Guy lost to Sam Sicilia in his debut. Aaron Phillips, that's it. Had a very dominant wrestling win over Phillips. Was just able to take him down repeatedly. I think most of that was Phillips' lack of takedown defense. Every time Hobar touched his leg, it seemed like he would just topple over. So I'm gonna go with Pettis. Obviously, I think he's a better striker. Hobar, got put out pretty easily by Munoz on the feet. So I got to go with Pettis. And I think he still has potential. I just don't think he's going to turn in really exciting performances and really chase that finish like we would expect him to. But I'll go with Pettis to win an easy decision. Moving on to the Fox Sports 1 preliminary card, which isn't that bad. I'm actually excited to see the Tough 19 winners again. A lot of people probably aren't because that season was so terrible. But obviously Faber versus Rivera, looking forward to that. But anyway, first fight, women's bantamweight fight, Raquel Pennington versus Ashley Evans-Smith. Raquel Pennington, I'm not real excited to see her fight. I don't think any of her other fights have been that exciting. I thought her best performance in the UFC was actually in the Tough House when she fought Jessamine Duke and outboxed her. And then in her UFC debut in the finale, fought Roxanne Modafferi, and Modafferi just wasn't able to compete with her on the feet. Pennington had a clear advantage, but still Pennington looked like she was really struggling to hurt her and put her away. And then in her next fight against Jessica Andrade, I don't remember too well. I think Pennington was out-clinched in that fight, stuffed up against the fence and couldn't create any separation. So I don't really think she's a big force in the division at all. Just kind of a marginal talent, and obviously newcomer Ashley Evans-Smith, I don't know anything about. So yeah, I can't give any analysis here. I wouldn't feel overly confident about Pennington just based on her handful of UFC fights. she hasn't been blown out in any of her fights, either by Andrade or in the house when she lost to Jessica Rakoczy. She looks tough enough to hang in there, but hasn't been overly impressive in her wins either. So I don't know who to take there. Moving on, light heavyweight, Corey Anderson, winner of Tough 19 versus newcomer Justin Jones, who I have no idea who that is. But Corey Anderson, and it's kind of weird, both of these winners, Corey Anderson and Eddie Gordon from Tough 19, both of these guys just look like decision machines in the house, looked like they were never going to get a finish, and for the rest of their careers. And then in the finale fights, both guys looked vastly improved, and both guys got very identical first round knockouts, and really blew their opponents out of the water. But after his, in the house, Anderson out-wrestled a couple guys, typical lay and pray stuff. I actually thought he lost his semifinal fight against Patrick Walsh, who picked up a win in the finale over Daniel Spawn. I really thought Walsh got robbed in that fight, but again, Anderson used his wrestling to win that. And then against Matt Van Buren in the finale, just took him out easily, hurt him, and just followed up with punches until he put him out. So obviously he looked vastly improved with his striking, has that wrestling. He's a big, strong guy, athletic. So I actually think he has some potential. And this is a guy I would feel comfortable taking just based on how he looked in the finale. I mean, Matt Van Buren certainly isn't a great prospect or anything, but like I was saying with the previous fight with Raquel Pennington, how I wouldn't count on her to win just because of her UFC experience. I have a feeling about Corey Anderson. I think he's I think he has potential, and he is training out of I believe the lab with Ben Henderson and those guys, so I think he's going to improve. But obviously I don't know anything about Justin Jones, so again, can't make a pick here. Moving on to middleweight, Eddie Gordon, I believe his nickname is Truck, which is yes, it is Truck, which is a pretty cool nickname. Taking on Josh Samman. Josh Samman from Tough 17, and Eddie Gordon, the other winner of Tough 19. And again, just like I talked about Anderson, Gordon had a very controversial decision win against Cathal Pendred in his semifinal fight. Another decision fighter, just looked like an average boxer. Didn't use any wrestling at all that I can remember in his 2 fights in the house. Just kind of boxed guys at range, and never hurt anyone or mixed up his striking at all. Just barely got by with basic boxing, it looked like. And then in the finale against Diego Lima, the only guy to finish a fight, or I think one of only 2 guys to finish their fights in the house, and the only guy who looked like he had any promise from the show. Gordon just ran over him in that first round, blasted him. His hands looked heavy, looked like he had great hand speed, and just put Lima out. Was really impressed with him. He's also out of Cerro Longo, so he's getting great training over there. And really his fights in the house, he just, he looked like he just had a jab cross, and then against Diego Lima was throwing these wild bombs and looked great. Josh Samman, on the other hand, coming back from a real long layoff, about 1.5 years in the house, looked pretty good. Knocked out Tor Troen in the house, and then lost to Kelvin Gastelum. Got subbed pretty early in that fight. Got his back, I believe, got taken down, had his back taken and subbed out. And then in the finale fought Kevin Casey. Actually was stuck in a triangle armbar real early in that fight. Fought his way out of it, and I think ground and pounded Casey to get the TKO win. But with the layoff, Eddie Gordon having this momentum again, just like Corey Anderson, looking vastly improved from his time in the house to his finale fight, and that knockout power he seems to have now. I got to go with Gordon. I got to go with Gordon to win this fight. I think he can probably finish Samman. And next up at bantamweight, Uriah Faber versus Francisco Rivera. I really wish this was on the main card, but what can you do? They've kind of put themselves in a tight spot with these Fox Sports 1 prelim cards leading into the pay-per-view. They have to have a strong headliner, so I guess we just kind of have to accept it for what it is. But Uriah Faber versus Francisco Rivera. I'm taking Faber just to roll over Rivera, basically. And I have to go on a little rant here about Faber. I think it was a huge mistake for him to take that Browne rematch on short notice. Not only on short notice like he did, I think it was 6 weeks after he beat McDonald, but after a very busy year where he fought 4 times, I believe. 4 times he fought Menjivar, Jorgensen, Alcantara, and McDonald, and then 6 weeks after that fought Browne. But that year was incredible for Faber. Had finishes over Jorgensen, Menjivar, dominant win over Alcantara, and then I thought that fight against McDonald, I was actually picking McDonald to win that fight, and Faber just blew me away. His striking looked incredible, real patient. He looked like a sniper, coming in with those big overhand bombs, hurt McDonald on the feet, and then finish him off with his signature guillotine. I thought that was Faber's best performance in the UFC against against the highest level opponent. I mean, he's dominated a lot of other guys, but no one, I think, with as much potential or as much momentum as McDonald, or anyone who had a real chance of beating Faber like McDonald did. I thought that was one of the best performances of his career, especially after he lost to Browne for the first time. Everyone was wondering whether he could still be a contender, and had that incredible year with 4 wins. And then, after such a busy year, I seriously doubt he was in good enough shape to fight Browne on 6 weeks' notice. But not only that, how do you game plan for a guy as deadly and as unorthodox as Browne? I thought that was just a terrible move. And it showed in that fight. He got put out quick in the first round, and coming off of that performance against McDonald, like I said, I thought one of the best performances of his career. I thought he actually had a chance to be very competitive with Browne had he had a full training camp and adequate preparation. That first fight with Browne, Browne won, but he didn't really come close to finishing Faber at all, never hurt him. And the kind of improvements Faber made and showed in that McDonald fight, I thought if he had time to game plan for Browne, that could have been a very competitive fight. Now, anyway, with all that being said, when Faber came back after his loss to Browne to fight Alex Caceres, I was thinking, again, based off of that McDonald win, he's going to come in here and roll over the guy. And I thought he looked very flat. I thought his age was really showing in that fight. I thought he looked uninspired, slow. Just everything was going against him. Caceres was he had him confused and frustrated on the feet. And Faber just kind of willed his way to a win. I believe it was in the second round. Just kind of bull rushed him for a takedown, got his back, and subbed him out. Which, is impressive when being able to just turn it on at any moment in that way. But, I had some serious doubts about Faber after that performance against Caceres. That was the first time where I thought he really didn't look himself. His athleticism looked really like it had declined. He just looked old. So I do have some questions about Faber. I don't know if he can get back to that true elite contender level. But Rivera, I think, is really outmatched here. Obviously, another guy's made great improvements in his career after being cut from the UFC, came back, had some knockout wins, but other than his knockout win over Delorme, he can't really one-shot knockout anybody. His wins over Edwin Figueroa and also against George Roop, identical knockout wins where he catches the guy and then just has to expend all of his energy, goes all out in a flurry to finish them. And, looks like if fights like, that he knows that's his only chance, and if he can't finish them there, he will have expended so much energy that, he wouldn't be able to win the fight after that. And fighting a more complete and a high-level fighter like Mitsugaki, he was really exposed. Mitsugaki actually hurt him and dropped him early in that fight, and then just out-wrestled and ground and pounded him, really dominated him. So Rivera, I just don't think has the ground game or the submission defense. And even as I'm not going to say Faber looked bad against Caceres, but, those problems in his game that I mentioned, even considering those, I think Faber will be able to take him down at will early on and sub him out. So, got to go with Faber. Sorry, that was a really long analysis there, but keep moving through here, keep it fast. Onto the main card at lightweight, like I said, a perfect opener for the pay-per-view. Tony Ferguson versus Abel Trujillo. Great matchup. Trujillo, bit of a layoff, about 6 months, fought last in February. Knockout win over Jamie Varner, but was very close to being put out in that fight himself. Was hurt on the feet, and in that fight, just seemed to be very one-dimensional on the feet. His striking looks very stiff, really trying to... seems like he has a focus on power and doesn't really have a jab or a conventional striking game, just big haymakers. And Ferguson, on the other hand, I think has a really diverse striking game, although in his last fight against Danny Castillo, I actually thought a lot of that went away. He wasn't able to use those weird angles that he used against Aaron Riley or Yves Edwards, and struggled a bit with Castillo. Got put on his back. I believe Trujillo has a wrestling background, but Ferguson, with his length and with his way more diverse and way more advanced striking, I think he's really going to be able to keep Trujillo at bay, outstrike him at distance. I don't think Trujillo can close that distance like he needs to land that big shot. And Ferguson has that great Darce choke, always jumps on it. Even went to his back against Castillo, trying to finish that. I think Ferguson, even though he struggled against Castillo in his last fight, I still think he's a really good talent and still improving. Obviously, Trujillo has some promise too, but he's shown holes in his stand-up. Like I said, against Varner, got out-wrestled by Nurmagomedov pretty badly. I think Ferguson can win this one, just a more talented striker, and with that length, I think he's going to keep him at bay. So I got Ferguson. I'd say a decision win would be more likely than a finish, but Ferguson does have finishing ability. Moving on to heavyweight, Todd Duffee. Is this his return? Yeah. Or no, it's not. I'm sorry. I don't know why the reason for his layoff, but hasn't fought in 2 years, so pretty long layoff, but excited to see him back. Kind of a novel heavyweight. I'll always remember him for getting knocked out by Mike Russo in one of the best come-from-behind victories ever. Duffee just throwing everything at him, dominating him for the whole fight, and then Russo just pulling it seemed like the first punch he threw in the whole fight just put Duffee out cold. But Anthony Hamilton, one of these really low-level heavyweights, the UFC has had a big influx of heavyweights over the past year or so. In his debut, lost to Alexei Olenek by neck crank. I think that is a sign of not a very savvy fighter on the ground. And then against Ruin Potts, finished him, took him down, but it took him about 50 body shots to the ribs from Mount for him to finish that fight. And it's just one of those fights where he finished the guy, but he looked so terrible doing it that I couldn't help but feel that he came away from that fight just not looking too good, even though he got the finish win. So Todd Duffee, with his power, I expect him to just crush Hamilton, put it on him early. His last fight was a knockout win, first round over Phil DeFries, who's I don't believe is in the UFC any longer. That was his last fight anyway in the UFC, but I expect Duffee to just roll over Hamilton, and I'm kind of excited to see it. Glad it's on the main card, replacing the women's fight, but Duffee by first round knockout. Next up, a heavyweight, Travis Browne versus Brendan Schaub. This is a pretty good fight. I don't think it's the best matchup, but I think Browne has the edge with his power. He was on a real roll before losing to Verdum, but he has those great downward elbows when guys try to get in on his legs and take him down against the fence. He has those great downward elbows. They used to knock out Josh Barnett, Gabriel Gonzaga, although a couple of those might have been illegal. And big power, moves. He's light on his feet. That knockout against Stefan Struve. And then his comeback win over Overeem, able to knock him out. So he's got big knockout power, but I think against Verdum was really exposed. I don't think Browne, he just doesn't have a conventional striking game that he can rely on for 3 rounds. I mean, he can land that big shot, put his opponent out, but I don't think he's skilled enough on the feet to trade with the guy for 3 rounds. Has also won in other ways. I think Rob Broughton out-wrestled him, took him down, and then against Chad Griggs, took him down and got a arm triangle submission. But Brendan Schaub seems like he's really making a point to fight on the ground in his recent fights, and just over the years has proven that he just doesn't have the chin to strike with these heavyweights. I mean, has suffered many knockouts. Big Nog, Ben Rothwell, Roy Nelson, all these guys knocked him out. And just isn't as aggressive on the feet after suffering those back-to-back knockouts to Big Nog and Ben Rothwell. He stood with Gonzaga for 3 rounds, knocked out Crow Cop, and had a couple of other knockout wins in there. But then against LeVar Johnson and Matt Mitrione, you see that he's very calculated in what he throws on the feet and really looks to get the fight to the ground. Had an impressive submission win over Mitrione. I really didn't expect that. And then against Andrei Arlovsky in his last fight, I thought he got robbed. I thought he should have won that fight. Got held up against the fence, but I thought he outstruck Arlovsky. Didn't really do anything to hurt him. Not an impressive performance for Schaub, but I did think he won. I think he has a chance to out-jab Browne for a decision win. Outstrike him with a more conventional boxing game. But I just don't trust him to. I don't trust his chin to hang in there with Browne, who has big power and can put people out. I think Browne will catch him eventually. And I wouldn't count on Schaub's wrestling game being good enough to take Browne down like he did to Mitrione or LeVar Johnson and lay in prelims. So I got Browne by knockout. And next up at lightweight, co-main event, great fight, Anthony Pettis versus Gilbert Melendez. Really excited to see Pettis get back at it. He seems to be one of these guys like Cain Velasquez that just can't stay healthy, and it's really unfortunate. I was really looking forward to that Josh Thompson fight that was supposed to happen a year ago. And so this will be Pettis' return after about a year and a half layoff. So a really long time out of the cage. But I have to be honest, I think he's going to destroy Melendez. And I feel uncomfortable saying that because Melendez is obviously an elite fighter. But honestly, after going 3 rounds with Diego Sanchez, in a fight where Sanchez took his back right at the start of the fight and also dropped him in the 3rd round, and then Sanchez goes on to look terrible against Ross Pearson, gets shut out by Miles Jury. That, to me, didn't look good for Melendez, and I think because the fight was so exciting, just a bar brawl of a fight, back and forth and exciting and all that, I think people, didn't really evaluate that like as critically as they should have. Nobody considers Sanchez a high-level fighter today in the lightweight division, and Melendez going 3 rounds with him. I mean, I'm sure Melendez didn't fight as calculated, as intelligently as he could have. Probably was playing to the crowd and wanted to put on an exciting fight, but I still think that's telling. His fight with Ben Henderson, was more competitive with Ben Henderson than other really high-level fighters previously had been. Ben Henderson was just coming off of that super dominant performance against Nate Diaz, and Melendez comes in and it's a razor-thin fight, but at the same time, after having a great first round in that fight, outstriking Henderson, couldn't really get anything going, and just looked like he didn't have any other tools to go to, couldn't take Henderson down, couldn't really make anything happen on the feet, and I thought that fight was kind of a stalemate. And against a guy like Pettis, I mean, Pettis is just a killer. Obviously super talented and unorthodox on the feet, extremely lethal. Donald Cerrone, extremely high-level fighter, very talented on the feet as well. And you saw how quickly Pettis took him out. Had that flying knee, that knee off of the cage to the body. And against Ben Henderson in the second fight, looked incredible. Great kicks, was really utilizing the body kick against Henderson, got taken down and off of his back, just subbed him immediately, real slick armbar. And, that's not something new. That's been something long in the making. Back in the WC, he had a couple of wins by triangle. One of them over Shane Roller. I can't remember the other guy, but Pettis is a real complete fighter, real dangerous off of his back, and even more dangerous on the feet. And Melendez, that last fight against Sanchez, I just don't think he showed enough there that convinces me that he can hang with a guy like Pettis on the feet. I think Melendez really needs to utilize the wrestling, but again, Pettis is so dangerous off of his back, I don't think it would even matter if he got taken down. And I'm not convinced that Melendez could take him down if he wanted to. So I got to go with Pettis. I think he's going to get the first round finish. I really do. In the main event, welterweight fight, Johnny Hendricks versus Robbie Lawler. Johnny Hendricks, one of my favorite fighters. I started watching UFC. My first event was UFC 100, and Hendricks fought on UFC 101. And since then, I've just followed every one of his fights, seen his progression, and I don't know. I've always kind of appreciated that I was able to follow his UFC career from the beginning, all the way from his first fight to when he got the belt. First fight was super exciting, great fight, super competitive. I mean, what a high level back and forth title fight. Razor thin. Lawler definitely hurt Hendricks and had pushed him farther than I think anyone before had pushed him. Hendricks is one of these unbreakable guys. You know, he can get those impressive first round knockouts over Fitch and Campman, and then he can fight real gritty, drawn out decisions like against GSP, Koscheck, and you can make that argument that Koscheck probably won that fight. But you know, Hendricks, he doesn't get deterred when the fight gets gritty and ugly. And that first fight, you know, Lawler had him hurt, but Hendricks hung in there, stood right in front of him. His jab seems to be improving with every fight. It was just pot-shotting Lawler, standing right in front of him, a real gutsy thing to do, and was able to go to his wrestling in that third round to win. And I'm real torn on this fight. I really don't feel confident picking either guy. On one hand, you know, Hendricks hasn't fought since that first fight with Lawler, and since then Lawler has fought 3 times, or twice, I believe. Has fought twice, and has looked greatly improved in that Ellenberger fight. I thought he showed patience. He showed a really sharpened up and refined jab that he didn't have in the Hendricks fight, and really bided his time and put Ellenberger away in that third round with the flying knee. And then against Matt Browne, didn't look as impressive, but fought a real tough decision against a surging guy who's also real dangerous on the feet, and won that fight fairly convincingly. I thought he was pretty dominant. So, you know, and Hendricks, you know, the rumor is, or I guess it's not a rumor, but he had a bicep injury, and you know, I don't know how much that really affected him in the first fight. I kind of feel like Hendricks is so tough, he probably fought to the best of his ability in that first fight. But if it's true that he was injured and now he's healthy, I mean, that could be a big factor. And Hendricks has that wrestling, although he doesn't seem to use it early in the fight, and I think that's going to be a big key for him. I think he needs to go to that wrestling earlier in that fight. He's great at getting the takedown when he really needs it, when he's really hurt on the feet and in danger of being finished. Against Condit, you saw that in the third round, and also against Lawler in that fifth round, took him down. But I don't believe he took down Lawler even once before the fifth round in that fight. So if Hendricks stands in front of Lawler for this next in this fight, I think Lawler can definitely be more patient, fight more intelligently, use that jab, pick his shots, and you know, I think Lawler can retain his power, you know, deeper into a fight than Hendricks can, his knockout power. But if Hendricks goes that wrestling early, makes Lawler work harder in those earlier rounds, I think Hendricks can win. I just think he's the more complete fighter. But if he decides to stand right in front of Lawler like he did in the first fight, I really think his chances greatly decline at that point. I think it really swings in Lawler's favor. I'm going to side with Hendricks. You know, both guys extremely tough, 2 real unbreakable guys, but Hendricks with that wrestling, and a guy who really makes improvements fight to fight. I just give him a slight edge to win another decision here. but I think it's really just a toss-up and razor thin to pick. So I wouldn't be one bit surprised if Lawler won this fight or even put him away. So, but I'll go with Hendricks. All right, guys, those are my predictions for UFC 181, Hendricks versus Lawler 2. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Please like the video, comment, subscribe, challenge me on any of my picks. And really try hard to keep these videos short, but looks like I wasn't successful with that this time. But I'll be back with my predictions for the Ultimate Fighter 20 finale and Dos Santos versus Miocic. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.